Friends, hello. Welcome back to Small Group. I hope you are well. I hope you had a great time of rest over half term. And a particular special shout out today to our newest small group, the new Wednesday small group with Victoria and Latoya. If you are watching today and you're part of that small group, welcome. I hope you have a great time as you settle into your group together, and to everybody else, welcome back. We're going to be taking some time in the weeks ahead to look through some of the Psalms. I love Psalms. Psalms are brilliant. You know, when you don't know perhaps what to read, or maybe you don't know how to pray, turn to the Psalms and start there. There's a whole range of lived experiences that we see captured there. The whole spectrum of emotions, from praise and celebration, God, you are amazing, right through to despair and depression and lament and where is God and why do these things happen? And I find that really encouraging, because if the Bible records that, if the Bible shows people in that place, it doesn't whitewash over it, it doesn't pretend that those times, those feelings don't exist. It's there, clearly recorded for everyone to see. And that means that surely it's okay when you and I find ourselves in that same place. And there's wisdom in the Psalms. You know, how do we pray when we're not even sure if God is listening? How do we worship in the face of tragedy? The Psalms teach us. And there's help in the Psalms. You know, there's times in life when perhaps we don't know what to say. We're just feeling empty and we've got nothing there, and we don't know what to read, what to pray, what to say. The Psalms can really help us to put words where we don't have any. And so we'll be taking time in the weeks ahead to draw out just some of the Psalms that capture the whole range of emotions and life experiences that we face. And we'll see, how do we find God in those places? What does our prayer life, our worship look like in those times? And we start today in Psalm 3. If you've not already read, you know the drill. Pause the video and read together Psalm 3, but also 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 1 to 31. Psalm 3 is David's prayer in a time of trial. And it starts, not every psalm has this, but for the psalms that do, it's really useful to pause and look at. It starts with this line that gives us some context, if you like. We see a psalm of David regarding the time David fled from his son Absalom. Now, I've done the hard work for you. You can find that story, the context that it gives, in 2 Samuel chapter 15. But in short, Absalom stabbed his dad in the back and organised a mutiny, a rebellion, an uprising against him. He wanted to overthrow his dad when he was king. As you read that passage, imagine David's emotions. Imagine what he went through, what he felt, the fear, the uncertainty, the sadness, the loneliness, the sense of being betrayed. Perhaps, yes, amongst all of that, he would have at times have felt a little bit encouraged because there were at least some people who stuck by him and were faithful to him. But if you're anything like me, and if David was anything like me, the negative massively outweighed the positive. Picture those emotions. David saw in that moment the reality that leadership can be a tough and a lonely place. And it's in that place that he writes these words in Psalm 3. Now, the first thing that I want us to see before we get into the psalm is a word that breaks up the psalm. You'll have it in your Bible perhaps as the word Selah. We see it at the end of breaking up the psalm at the end of verse 2 and at the end of verse 4 and at the end of verse 8. Depending on your translation, you might have it there in italics at the end of those verses, Selah, or I think the New Living Translation translates it as interlude, or you might not have it at all there in the text, but in the footnotes at the bottom of the psalm or the page, you should have a footnote, if nothing else, explaining that at the end of verse 2 and verse 4 and verse 8 is this Selah. Now remember that psalms were originally written as songs. They were written to be sung. And so it's thought that Selah is a musical instruction that simply encourages those who are reading or singing to pause, to take a breath, to reflect on what has just been read or said or sung. And so that word Selah breaks up the psalm quite helpfully, and we'll look through those sections in the way that it suggests. So verse 1 and 2. O Lord, I have so many enemies. So many are against me. So many are saying, God will never rescue him. You know, David is describing the challenges that he's facing, the battle, the people that he's up against. And yet see the very first thing that David says in this psalm, O Lord. When you see in the Psalms Lord, all in capital letters, it is the name Yahweh that is being used. It is how Yahweh is translated into Lord, all with capital letters. Yahweh is the name that we see in Exodus, the name by which God revealed himself to Moses. When God let Moses know that, you know, I can be known by you. You can know my name. The name that he revealed to Moses was Yahweh. In this name, Yahweh, or Lord, all in capitals in the Psalms, we see the Creator God who can be known personally. You see, in times of trouble, David knows God by name. He calls on him by name. The God who can be known. You see, it doesn't matter how many foes, how many enemies are rising up against him. It doesn't matter that people are rising up. It doesn't matter what they say or that they think that his God is powerless. David knows the name and the nature of the God that he serves. Pause and think about that for a minute. You know God personally. It doesn't matter what you face, what is coming against you, what people say to you, about you, behind your back. It doesn't matter what is done to you. What matters is that you know the living God personally. And David carries on, verse 3 and 4. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me. You are my glory, the one who holds my head high. I cried out to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy mountain. Selah, pause. Think about that for a second. Notice that the gap between appearance and reality, the appearance of his situation and the reality of his God was huge. Verse 1, the appearance was that he was vastly outnumbered and hopeless. And yet the reality, verse 3, is that by God he was shielded. The appearance, verse 2, was that God wouldn't hear him or deliver him or be able to do anything for him. The reality in verse 4, he did. Friends, it doesn't matter that your battle is tough or that people are talking you down. It matters that God is faithful and powerful. It matters that he lifts up the humble and he pulls down the proud. It doesn't matter how many, verse 1. It doesn't matter that many are saying, verse 2. It matters, verse 3, that you, Lord. And verse 5 to 8. I lay down and slept. Yet I woke up in safety, for the Lord was watching over me. I'm not afraid of 10,000 enemies who surround me on every side. Arise, O Lord, rescue me, my God. Slap all my enemies in the face, shatter the teeth of the wicked. Victory comes from you, O Lord. May you bless your people. Now, hopefully, at the beginning of today's session, you had time just to sit for a few minutes in silence. And I wonder, as you did that, how it felt. I wonder what you heard. I know that I find when I sit in silence, it's not very often I get the chance to do it. Sometimes I'm reminded just to take a few moments to sit and be still. And it's in those moments that we find peace. It's in those moments that we're more able perhaps to think clearly. It's in those moments that we hear the still small voice of God. If you weren't able to take those few minutes at the beginning of your session, perhaps you connect with small group while you're doing other things. I'd encourage you not to do that. If you're able to, set aside the time and really prioritise just focusing on your time together. But if you're not able to do that, maybe you're cooking or you're looking after children while you're connecting with your small group, or for any other reason you weren't able to take those few minutes at the start of your session, then later on, take whatever time you can, perhaps 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just rest. Close your eyes, sit in silence and just take time in silence. And allow God to speak to you in the peace of that moment. Well, David describes the peace that he has and the rest that he has, knowing that God has him. And then his prayer in verse 7 and 8 comes from knowing that it's not his fight, and he hands it over to God. Let me encourage you right now. If you are up against it, if you are in a battle right now, if you are going through the mill, if you're in trials right now, David teaches us 3 very simple things. Firstly, call on the God that you know. The living God, the Creator, the all-powerful one, the sustainer, the one who is just and will one day judge, is also your Father. And he is available to you right now. Notice in this psalm that David does 2 things. In verse 1, he tells God about his troubles. And in verse 7, he asks God to help. And that might seem really simple, but David teaches us to do it, and so let me encourage you. No matter what you are going through right now, no matter what you're facing, what you're up against, what people are saying, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, what you're fearing, right now, call on the God that you know. Tell him what you are facing. There's nothing too small and there's nothing too big. And ask him to help. In those moments of silence that you keep, have that conversation with God. Tell him and then listen for him. Secondly, remember the difference between the appearance of your situation and the reality of God is huge. And you can choose to focus on the reality of God over the appearance of your situation. Choose to focus on the promises of God, the nature of God over the appearance of your situation. Thirdly, trust God to give you peace and rest. Allow God to take on the battle instead of you. As you take those moments of silence, and as you talk to God about the things that you're facing, allow him to take them from you. Allow him to give you peace and rest. Take time to pray in your groups, even right now, today, that whatever you're going through, even tonight, that God would give you rest and peace. Friends, may God bless you. Have a great time as you share together in your groups today.